Can't say enough about Anita Strang, Bud Strang, our bartender back there. Mr. Kerry Wilson of 610 sitting back there all quietly, cerebrally. Thank you, sir. I mean, one of my favorite stories is Kerry telling me that he's on a plane reading the Graham Parsons book, and then he has this revelation. Hey, we own that building. And that was back in the day when this place looked so different. And just to see it now in this wonderful condition is so gratifying. Yes, it's so gratifying. And next month, we're going to have our very first Rock and Roll Hall of Famer here. Chris Hillman of the Byrds is playing a sold-out show here. You better have already gotten your tickets. So, this really is a dream come true. And thank you all so much for being here. You know, the sign out front says Graham Parsons, Derry down. But as I look at some of the people in the audience, Jim Carlton. Jim, would you wave? Could we acknowledge you? Thank you. Jim was such a critical source for me from the beginning when I met him here 10 years ago, right, 2007. And we came to this building, and he talked about recording Graham Parsons in the Shilohs in this building, right over there where the stage was. It was right there. And not only did he make the recording, he still had it from off the radio. So it's the instant provenance for this building. So if we have really one person to thank from the beginning, it's Mr. Carlton, who is a very talented writer, comedian, songwriter, guitar player. He's just been a great source of inspiration. So if you would be kind enough, just one more round of applause. And it's also such a pleasure to have a number of other musicians from what I call the youth center circuit. Right, Cornel? That's John Cornel down there. John played drums with the Byrds and the great Gene Clark, and John had a wonderful career himself. John, raise your hands so everybody can see you and acknowledge you. And Mr. Jesse Chambers, another one from the Youth Center circuit. He and several brothers, the Chambers brothers, cousins, and you were so generous with your time when I was writing the Graham book, and you talked about the bass that I guess he gave you a couple of bucks to be able to buy it, and he still had it on his wall, and that was just priceless. So Jesse, welcome. So it says Graham Parsons, Derry down, but frankly it's the Jesse Chambers, John Cornel, Jim Carlton, Derry down. And living history, it's wonderful. But today we are here to talk about young Elvis. And I want to ask you a question. What's your first Elvis memory?
I Break Hotel on the radio.
I Break Hotel. Anybody actually see him here in Florida in the 50s? Anybody? Well, I'm going to tell you my first memory. It's 1969, and my poor dad is taking us all in a Winnebago to Disneyland. Myself, my 6 siblings, and my mom. And we're driving along the mountains through getting out west. And I was the little kid who would sit in back and go, hey, Dad, what if we accidentally drove off this mountain right now? What if the wheel fell off right now? So we get to Disneyland, and this was 69, and my poor dad is backing in to the space at the campground. You remember those water spigots that would stick right up out of the ground? Well, my poor old man, this Winnebago would actually, if you signaled left, it would tell motorists you're going right. Okay, so he just could not win for losing. And as he backs into this water spigot, he bends it over. And so my first memory of Elvis is hearing my oldest brother Jim singing his song, The Wonder of You, and one of my older brothers, John, trying to bend the spigot back, and instead it broke off. So my first Elvis memory is The Wonder of You and my first geyser shooting out of the ground, at Disneyland so many years ago. But the reason I wanted to bring along some slides is to give you a sense of what many people's first memories of Elvis would be. And since we're in this building, I just wanted to mention that Graham Parsons saw Elvis when he was 9 years old on one of these Florida tours. And it was the only day where they actually went over the state line into Georgia. And Graham said it changed his life. From there on, he decided to pursue his career in country rock. So Anita, if we'll take a look at this first slide. This is a clip of video. Okay. This is
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to
3 weeks
present
before
one of
Graham
radio's
saw
most
him.
disc jockeys, Bill Randall. William?
We'd like at this time to introduce you to a young fellow who, like many performers, Johnny Ray among them, come up out of nowhere to be overnight very big stars. This young fellow we saw for the first time while making a movie short. We think tonight that he's going to make television history for you. We'd like you to meet him now, Elvis Presley, and here he is.
Well, get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. Get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. Oh, I don't know my breakfast cause I'm a hungry man. I believe you're doing me wrong and now I know. I believe you're doing me wrong and now I know. Cause all I wept and passed the money go. Well, let's shake, rattle and roll. 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 Boy, you won't do right till every dog knows so.
So that was Elvis on Stage Show at the beginning of 1956. So this would have been 6 months before Ed Sullivan, several months before he's on Steve Allen singing in the tuxedo to the Hound Dog, and probably 4 months before he was on Milton Berle's. This was his first national television appearance. And of course you recognize the musicians behind him, the legendary Scotty Moore on guitar, Bill Black on the bass. And I'm not sure if that's that is DJ Fontana. That may have been their very first live show together because they added DJ in '56, and Elvis's manager Tom Parker was such a skinflint that they made the backing musicians pay him out of their own cut. And of course, now we talk about that controversial figure, Tom Parker, and we'll be talking about him a little bit later. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was how fortunate I was to get some fantastic primary sources in this book. Anita, let's see if we can take a look here. Governor Bob Graham actually saw Elvis at the Olympia in Miami in 1956. And I will never forget this story because I'm a reporter in Orlando, and I'm sitting in the live truck, dead from the neck up as usual. And I get this phone call from the 305 area code, and I almost didn't answer it. But I went ahead and picked it up. Mr. Kealing? Yes. Bob Graham. Tell me about Elvis. I'm shocked. I'm like, well, Governor, I was kind of hoping you'd tell me. But it was great to have him as a primary source because he saw Elvis at the beginning of Elvis Mania. And as Presley was being criticized for starting to be obscene and things like that, it was interesting to get Governor Graham's take on this. He was a 19-year-old freshman at UF at the time. So I was privileged to have him as just one of the primary sources in this book. Anybody recognize this guy? Joe Namath. Does the name Steve Bender mean anything to anybody? Steve was the producer of Elvis's '68 comeback special. And you want to talk about living history. And to be able to talk to him for hours about why this special turned out so good. Remember, this book is about 55 to 61 and Elvis's rise in Florida. So you're like, okay, this is 68. Why are you concerned about that? because Steve Binder is one of the very few people still living who could talk at length about the relationship between Presley and Tom Parker, his manager. And Parker would actually call him Bindle. And when he wanted his way, Binder said Parker would actually try to stare at him and like mesmerize him, hypnotize him, because Parker was a carny, and you know he knew these carnival games. And Binder stood up to him and said, "No, we're going to do it my way." And thank goodness he did, because that's why this special was so lasting. But to get his perspective on what it was like for Presley after fame, and as he's starting to do these movies that are unsatisfying, that was an amazing primary source, and I'll always remember him for that. Next. This is Annie Helm, who starred with Elvis in Follow That Dream over on the west coast of Florida. They shot this over 6 weeks in July and August of 1961. And Annie is an artist herself now out in California. And she had a pretty amazing perspective in terms of what it was like for Presley now that he's, you know, a movie star and he's dealing with sort of the cloistered fame. And she was also witness to his beginning to use prescription drugs. This is just after he'd gotten out of the Army, and he started to use them. He was using amphetamines to stay up all night on maneuvers. And she said, once in a while, when they were out carousing at night, they used some of these amphetamines to prop themselves up in the morning. But she said this wasn't like we were drug addicts. But she gave a very interesting perspective on his struggles with fame and the descent down the rabbit hole, unfortunately. So Annie was another great primary source, and I'll certainly treasure these pictures. She sent those to me. These are obviously promotional photographs from Follow That Dream, which came out in 1962. This is great. She's like Vanna over here. Okay. Going to the bonus round now. This guy is really special. The late Jim Kirk. I had a chance to sit down with him in Ocala. He was the guy that gave Elvis his very first headlining opportunity in Florida. And that's where it happened. Anybody know where that is? That's the Southeastern Pavilion. And Presley's first headlining opportunity was basically in that livestock pen on the back of an 18-wheel trailer. That was their stage. And Jim had another great perspective on Colonel Parker from the earlier days, and he was like, "Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you, that Tom Parker was one unique individual. I've often thought that when we were having trouble with the Russians, we should have sent him over there." But it was Parker whose badgering and insistence got people to move Presley up the bill. And you know, the people I've talked to said it never would have happened without the Colonel. Although you'll find out in the book that most of us are more colonels than he ever was. Next. This was another special one. This was in Waycross, Georgia, where Graham saw Elvis in 1956. Anybody recognize him?
Charlie Lou.
Charlie Lubin. That's right. The late Charlie. He passed away in 2011. But he and his brother Ira opened up for Presley in 1956. So again, getting that perspective on what it was like here from first person is amazing. But Charlie said his hard-drinking kind of, his brother Ira was a pretty fiery-tempered guy. And he said that he confronted Elvis backstage in the Carolinas, where Elvis is playing a gospel tune backstage. And Ira said, you know, why do you play this nice music out back here and play that crap you play out there? And Elvis said, I'm only giving the people what they want. They almost came to blows, and as a result of it, Charlie said, Elvis never recorded any of the Louvin Brothers songs, and it probably cost their catalog millions. Next. So let's go a little more specific to Polk County. You probably don't recognize this young woman. Her name is Elvalie Donaldson. and she was a 21-year-old reporter for the Lakeland Ledger. And of all of the people who wrote about Presley, she was the best at 21. And as he appeared at the Polk Theater in August of '56, she told a great story in the paper of sitting on the back steps. And it's 100 degrees outside in August, as you can imagine. Presley pulls up in his lavender Lincoln and just breezes right on by her and ignores her. Well, she's not going to take that. She walks right in and says, "Excuse me, Mr. Presley, I am a reporter for the Lakeland Ledger, and I am here to interview you." And he's like, "Oh, sorry, honey. I thought you were just some little girl trying to get a picture." And she did. She goes, "Yeah, I'm here to take your picture." And he stops and he says, "Okay, shoot." So let's see if we can show that picture. Oh, hang on. No. That one. That's Presley backstage at the Polk in Lakeland. And following right behind him was his secret girlfriend, June Juanico, who he tried to take on the tour, hoping no one would find out about her. But when they did, all heck broke loose. But her memories of being on that incredible tour of Florida in August of '56 give us a very intimate first-person account of what it was like being in the eye of that storm here in Florida in '56. So I love that picture, and I'm so thankful to Elvis' family for letting us use that in the book. But that's backstage at the Polk in August of '56. Let's go back if we can. Well, let's take, this is good. Because what I like to do, as you can figure out, being in a building like this, I actually try to leverage my research to recognize little-known or unrecognized historic venues throughout the state of Florida, and this is hallowed ground. Does anybody recognize it?
Homer Street?
Yeah.
Man, you are on a roll, Cornel. That's right. That's the Homer Hesterly Armory in Tampa. This is the only place Presley played on all 4 of his Florida tours in '55 and '56. It has just been renovated to become a new Jewish community center over there. But I don't think they're fully aware of the hallowed ground that place represents. So my hope is, as we publicize the book, maybe we can give them an idea to landmark that place. Go ahead, Nita. That picture was taken in Homer Hesterly. Arguably, that is the most famous picture of young Elvis that was ever taken. That was by Red Robertson, who took that July 31st, 1955, when Elvis opened for Andy Griffith, the comedy star, at Homer Hesterly and throughout Florida. So that's yet another piece of history from Elvis that happened here in Florida. Okay. Now we're going to go to another piece of audio here. This is a short clip, but as Presley is getting more and more famous in '56, he is getting more criticism. And this is him at the Polk, but this is after he's played Miami. And there was a columnist who actually said, Elvis's fans are idiots. Parents ought to smack that Elvis mania right off their kids' faces. Can you imagine? This is a columnist for the Miami Herald saying, parents, you need to slap your kids upside the head. So before, when Presley would do his interviews, it was kind of this aw shucks demeanor and yes sir, no sir. But this time the gloves came off. And at 21 years old, he is explaining why that columnist was wrong. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with his young fans having a good time at his show. This is about 45 seconds.
Sir, those kids that come here and pay their money to see this show come to have a good time. What's his name here? Probably might have had a little fun. He was young, I doubt it. Herb Rao, whatever his name is. I mean, I'm not running Mr. Rao down, but I just don't see that he should call those people idiots, because they're somebody's kids. They're somebody's decent kids, probably, that was raised in a decent home. And he hasn't got any right to call those kids idiots. If they wanna pay their money and come out and jump around and scream and yell, it's their business. They'll grow up someday and grow out of it. Now, while they're young, let them have their fun. Don't let some old man that's so old he can't get around sit around and call them what he can do. 21
years old, Elvis. Preach on, Brother Elvis. And you look at that, I love that picture. That is Elvis at the polk, and I actually found out the name of like the cop and the little kid, you know, he's there ushering, but I think he's a little bit distracted right there by the performance going on. But gosh, that picture there just tells a whole story. Let's check another one. Okay, this is another piece of hidden history that Jim Robinson, I would like to maybe bring up with Orlando, with the historic powers that be. Jim is one of my history heroes back there. He was a great writer for the Sentinel for many, many years. And Jim, say hi.
Hey, cool.
Thanks for coming. This house is where Jack Kerouac made his final edits on the road in College Park in Orlando at the end of 1956. And what was really fun was looking at Kerouac's first book of letters. He talks about his 14-year-old nephew doing a spot-on imitation of this brand new singing sensation by the name of Elvis Presley. So Kerouac's writing about Elvis while he's making his final edits to On the Road in this house, which also has no historic designation at this point. And given the fact that College Park is becoming McMansion Central, especially all around this house, it would be nice if maybe we could try to get that place landmarked. Anybody recognize her? Mae Axton? Mae Axton was Elvis's first publicist in Florida. She was a teacher, a homemaker, an aspiring writer. And she sort of took him by the hand when he was nobody through his early Florida tours in '55. And after he played Jacksonville in July of that year, she kind of made a facetious comment. She said, you know what, I'm going to write your first million seller. And that's exactly what she did. She and actually, it started with a journeyman musician by the name of Tommy Durden, who read this article. There's varying versions of what happened. But he read this, talked about this guy who jumped out of a building and left a note in his pocket that said, I walk a lonely street. And Tommy thought, wow, that's really moving. And he thought maybe it could be a song. And he takes it to Mae. And the Heartbreak Hotel was a figment of her imagination. There is no Heartbreak Hotel, except for the song. But the two of them wrote it. And let's see if we have that slide. Yeah, this is it. This is the place that should be landmarked yesterday. This is her house in Jacksonville where Elvis would come. This is Mae Axton's house where she and Tommy Durden wrote Heartbreak Hotel in one afternoon. And it still looks pretty much just like that for now. Let's see if we can, okay, ready to go? Not only did they write this song, this guy Glenn Reeds was a disc jockey in Jacksonville. And Mae and Tommy tried to do sort of a little rough cut demo together, and they didn't like the way it sounded. So Mae calls him up because he had just been on that tour with Elvis and Andy Griffith. And so Glenn comes over to the house and he's like, that's a crappy song. I'm not gonna do that. Mae finally gets him to record the demo of Heartbreak Hotel, same day, same house, same afternoon. And this is it. I hope. Oh, okay. Heartbreak Hotel.
Since my baby left, I found a new place to dwell. Down at the end of Lonely Street, Heartbreak Hotel.
So if you heard this song on YouTube, you'd be like, okay, why is this guy doing a cover of Elvis so badly? It ain't a cover. This is the original song. And so, armed with this song, armed with the demo, Mae Axton was getting frustrated because she couldn't get to Elvis. She finally goes to him at a disc jockey's convention in Tennessee, presents this, And Elvis's reaction, hot dog, May, I'll do it. And the timing could not have been better, because Elvis had just signed with RCA Records, and they went into the studio in January of '56, just 6 months after she made the facetious comment that she'd write his first million seller. And this was the first single off his first LP. The song that Glenn Reese said, oh, this is too stupid, I don't want songwriting credit for it. Again, you want to talk about costing millions. But this is it. And so that gives you a sense of some of where we go with this book. Elvis played 4 tours in 15 months in Florida. That's why I call Florida his breakout state. In 1956, he played more live shows in Florida than Texas, Tennessee, California combined, more than California, New York, Las Vegas combined. That's why I call Florida Elvis's breakout state. And it was interesting doing the research for the Graham Parsons book. It was almost like this book is a prequel to that. And it really gave me the sense of how Elvis was like Johnny Appleseed here in Florida. And it was no accident that 5, 6, 7 years after Elvis comes all over the state. And I mean, he played everywhere in the state, from Pensacola to Miami Beach and everywhere in between in venues large and small. And it was very compelling to follow the roads and think of Elvis going along 192 in his pink Cadillac, because you know what? It really happened. Played Fort Myers, Ocala, West Palm Beach, Orlando, Tampa, Sarasota, just all of these different venues. And I hope that the joy of following the road and talking to these primary sources, including the guy who's the usher at his first show in Daytona Beach on May 7th, 1955, and Elvis does maybe a song or two. Then you've got all of the other big stars like Slim Whitman and Hank Snow ahead. And he tells the story of Elvis just kind of slinking out and sitting right next to him in the crowd to watch the rest of the show. To me, those primary source stories are like gold. So I hope you enjoy them, and I would love to take some questions if you have any impressions. If you've got good Elvis stories yourself, I would love to hear them. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Cornell.
I got a